So, Judith, how would you describe survival mode?
Oh, it's one of those things that I think, for me personally, and for lots of people who I know, it's one of those things that you don't know you are operating in until you come out of it. Oh, I'm getting emotional already. Here we go. I should have brought the tissue box next to me. I had no idea that I was operating most of my life from the age of 8 in survival mode until I really came out of it when I was 43. I'm 52 now, for context. So 9 years, woo! And I think I think that's the challenge with survival mode. I think survival mode is just described as normal. Well, this is just normal. This is just me. This is just how it is. And I think that's the biggest challenge of survival mode is that very often you don't know you're in it because it has become your normal.
You may not know this, but the reason my audience do, because I've said it a million times, the reason why I started this podcast was very similar to you. I had been in survival mode since the age of 7. I wrote a memoir in my 40th year. And in writing that memoir, after being trauma informed, after being in this space for a moment, I recognized that I had been in survival mode for 2.5 decades. And the reason I lead with storytelling on this podcast is simply that I want people to be able to identify that's where they are and that they can get out
Mm.
of it and that they're not suffering alone. So I absolutely agree with that definition. Welcome to Survival Mode Disrupted, the podcast for those who are done performing, done people pleasing, and done living life on autopilot. I'm your host, Letitia, the Survival Mode Disruptor, and this is where we create disruptive, unapologetic transformations for those who are ready to exit survival mode and reclaim their power. Every episode is your permission slip to burn the rule book, break the cycle, and finally build a life that feels like yours. So let's disrupt everything that's holding you back and start living life on your own terms. This is your trigger warning. This podcast is raw. It is real and it doesn't sugarcoat what it means to survive trauma, abuse, mental health battles, or even the aftermath of living in survival mode for too damn long. What you hear on Survival Mode Disrupted includes unfiltered stories, graphic details, and a vulnerable truth that may trigger some of the audience. Please prioritize your emotional safety. If something feels too heavy, pause, breathe, come back when you're ready, or not at all. Your healing is yours to honor. These episodes are based on lived experience, not therapy sessions or clinical advice. Listening does not replace mental health treatment or constitute a coach client relationship. If you're in crisis, please seek immediate help from a licensed professional or contact your local emergency services. This space is built with care, but it's also built for truth and built for disruption. Take what you need, leave the rest, and most of all, trust yourself. If this podcast speaks to your soul, you don't have to do this work alone. Feel free to join our free Facebook community for high achieving women ready to break cycles and heal out loud. Join us at Disrupting Survival Mode on Facebook, or grab the book that started this movement, Exiting Survival Mode, a raw step by step guide to help you identify, release, and rebuild from the survival patterns that have been keeping you stuck. Hello, 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 and welcome back to another episode of Survival Mode Disrupted. I am your host, Letitia, the Survival Mode Disruptor, and today we have Judith. So, Judith, why don't you introduce yourself?
Oh, I love this question. So, this is me. I am a barefoot on the earth loving, crystal collecting, vocal sound healing, tree hugging, Formula One loving, meat eating, heavy metal rock chick.
Wow, I love it all. The tree hugging, Formula One loving, meat eating heavy rock or heavy metal rock chick.
Yeah.
Welcome. So now, Judith, I'm very curious for you to tell me your story to and through survival mode.
Oh, beautiful. And also, I think what's really important to say here, and me a few years ago, especially me when I started coaching, whenever that was, 2015, just before every second person was a coach. And I'd go to lots of events with coaches speaking and things like that. And I had massive imposter syndrome. In fact, I even wrote a blog about it that I wish my life were worse. I wish my life had been worse because in the coaching world, in especially in the motivational speaker world, the inspiration world, whatever you want to call it, there are so many stories of the big traumas, the whatever sexual abuse, child sexual abuse, parental beating up, the da 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 da, the homelessness, drug addiction, like those big stories that I was like, well, I'm just a middle class white girl who had ponies in the back garden and an Irish dad who was drunk a bit and had affairs left, right, and centre. And what have I got to be like? What's my trauma? I don't know your stuff. And I think it's really important. So, me a few years ago wouldn't have even spoken to you about being on this podcast because I'd have thought that my trauma wasn't big enough for me to feel like I had been in survival mode. And I think that's really important to say at the outset because, as I said, that thing about it's our normal and those obviously hideous things that I am very glad were not a part of my life are tremendous. And what I went through wasn't what a child should go through. Like, by rights, children should feel loved and safe at home. That is simply, and if you're not, then you are surviving something. Though you are in that space, or an adult, like, and your later life as an adult. So much of it, as I'm sure you know, Letitia, for most people, it's so much is linked to our childhood. But sometimes then things happen later. I know someone who was in a massive train crash in her early 30s, and that was then put her into survival mode, or anything can happen at any point in our life. And so I think what's really important is the not having comparisonitis. And for those who listen to this who maybe think, oh, but my life isn't that bad. My life isn't that bad. So I've got nothing to complain about. And that's mostly how I went through my life. It was just like, well, I'm a white middle class girl with ponies in the back garden. What have I got to complain about? And it's not until later that I've realized, no, that, my dad's behavior. So he was regularly drunk. If he'd been on whiskey, he was nasty drunk. Not physically violent that I knew of at the time, but would smash up rooms and tip up beds and smash things and pull things off walls. And just the other day, I was with mum actually, and she's doing a clear out, and she went, "Oh, I've kept these things and they're little statuettes that she hadn't. This one that your dad broke the leg off then, and this one that your dad broke there, and it's those little those things." And the permanent affairs, which meant my mum was often in tears, and me stepping up into adult mode, into, well, okay, she can't cope. He's not present. I will take care. I will. And that was my stepping into that survival. In fact, I remember it so clearly. Mum had been crying. She'd locked herself, bless her, into my older brother's bedroom, which was downstairs. So, she was trying to keep it from us. And I just sat on the stairs listening to her talking to her friend about divorce and is she going to get divorced and affair and the barmaid at the golf club and the da 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 da. And obviously I'd known all the arguments and everything. And when she came out, she saw me on the stairs. What are you doing here? And I was like, if you and daddy get divorced, then he can't make you cry anymore. Then you'll be happy, so we'll be happy. So I think you should get divorced. And it was that moment that I stepped into parenting mode. It was that moment that I was like, okay, she can't cope. So I'll, take responsibility for younger brother. I'll do this, I'll do that. And obviously not completely. And she was still present. She wasn't useless. She was there as a parent, but she was in if nothing else, emotionally abusive relationship. And that's sort of when it started, and the protecting people and the becoming a carer, becoming a natural healer. Anyway, I always go, I'm a natural healer. I'm like, I may be a natural healer, but did that start after that time? Did that process? Oh, excuse me, I had a nut earlier. It's caught in my throat. So that was, again, the without knowing it. And then growing up in the 70s and 80s in England, alcohol is prevalent. My father's Irish. He was borderline alcoholic. He's not very well at the moment. Most of his body's shutting down, apart from his liver, which is functioning perfectly, which is hilarious. It's about the only organ that's doing all right. So yeah, I started drinking fairly young. Nothing dramatic. Again, not into. I say nothing dramatic when you're 14, 15 and you go to a party with a bottle of wine. Is that it was normal for the 80s, what can I say? But come 18, 19 and other emotional traumas happening, and you start drinking to numb or drinking to survive, to like something big and emotional happening, have a Southern Comfort, something big and emotional happening, have a bottle of wine. And just taking that pattern through. So building up the survival mode is the barriers to relationship. And this is probably my biggest survival mode pattern. So I'm 52 years old and I have never been in a long-term relationship. I have never lived with anyone. The longest relationship that I've had was 11 months and 1 week. A bugger. Come on, I could have made a year. And there's survival mode in action. I just put up these barriers. And I remember at that young age, 8 years old, saying to myself, I am never going to let any man close enough to me to hurt me in the way that dad hurts mum. And it was like a vow that I'd made. And I didn't realize that until my mid-30s when I started my deep healing work and my spiritual work. And look, I was like, oh my God, I made that vow. And I've been undoing that work. And then since then, I'm like, well, I'm not going to compromise my values. So I am open to, and he is there, he will come. But there's another part of survival mode in action, a very black and whiteness of either yes or no, or, you are no one's coming further than this close to me. So in my relationships, very much that survival mode, very much, I'm a social butterfly, I'm an extrovert. That when I look back at my patterns, it was like I was on the outskirts of everyone's social circles. From the outside, it looks like I had like 100,000 friends. And she's like, she's the woman who's always busy, can never get hold of you. Always, with down at my local pub, which when I was 18, the landlord bought my Guinness over and went, nice to have you legal, Judith. Because it had been my local for about a year and a half. But if you'd have seen me down the pub as a teenager, I go from this group to that group to this group to that group, never really feeling like I'm going to make a place for myself here. And therefore feeling lonely and feeling like I don't belong. And the number of teen angst poems about being the lonely one in a crowded room and the suicidal thoughts that started when I was 17. So the first time I was suicidal was 17, thought-wise. I think it was always lingering there around. Had some great years where it wasn't, but then at 31 it came back very strongly. I was just out of a relationship, and I always wanted to be an actress because there's nowhere better to hide than in other people's characters. So how much of being an actor and how much of being a healer were from survival mode. And my acting career was going nowhere. I was 31 and I was looking at my friends who were in relationships, married with kids. houses. I'm like, I'm 31. I own nothing other than a shit car. I've never been in a long-term relationship. There are 15-year-olds who've had longer relationships than me. And, I even started writing a play about that moment when you stand on the edge of a train platform and wonder, what would happen if. And then you start, sorry, I say you, then I would start fantasizing about my funeral and who would show up. And most importantly, I would start fantasizing about who would feel really guilty for not calling me enough. And I really wanted them. And I felt really good in this fantasy that they were going to feel guilty. And I'm like, I want to kill myself to make them feel guilty. Yes. Like it would like that energy. So 31, that came back. And then again at 43. 43 is when I did my big healing. So yeah, so just before that. Whenever Brexit was, yeah, 2016. Yeah. But that plummeted me into, and I'd had a breakup the year before as well. So 2015, 16. No, it was 2016 because that's when 2017 when I left acting. So yes, so 2016 was my last big suicidalness, and that pattern of, to survive, I make myself an outsider, but then I feel like I don't belong. To survive, I keep busy, 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 full diary. So everyone's like, so then people don't call me because they think I won't be available. So this perpetuating circle. And looking after others and taking care of others and being the carer. And that's what survival mode has looked like to me through my life until I came to not unraveling, that sounds negative, but a positive unraveling, unpeeling all the layers of the onion, which the bloody onions never fully peel, but yeah, till the healing journey.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate your humor in your storytelling, because it can be dark, right? It can feel heavy when we retell these parts of our lives, especially standing on the edge of a train platform. And for those who don't know, when I first moved to the UK, I was like, is train lines or train stations the only place that people decide that's the end? Because when I first moved here, I was in the London area, and at least 3 times a week I was delayed because
Yes.
someone jumped. So
Yeah.
just to say that in case anybody didn't catch that reference. But you spoke about a lot, and based on what I heard you say, even though, you mentioned that often we don't know we're in survival mode. What I feel I heard you say in the way that you told your story was there was this absence of safety.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we don't recognize that there is an absence of safety. And then when we are safe, we can't always embrace it, especially if we've been in that space for an extended period of time,
And
you know?
especially, yes. And like the last time I was in suicidal thoughts at 43, and I said to my mum, because my deep wound is I'm not wanted.
Hmm.
And I was like, right, I can't just, I need to speak. So, and I was on the phone to my mum. By the way, anyone listening who might be in that kind of space, very often the people closest to you are the wrong people to tell because they love you, and if they're anything like my mum, who's clearly got her own PTSD and traumas and things going on from her life experiences, very often they're like. So I said to mum, I said, I just feel so unwanted, and she went, "Don't be stupid, you're wanted." So she laughed and dismissed it. Now I know that comes from her discomfort and her love and her just not even wanting to talk about it. And also, it made me just go, okay, clam up, I'm not telling anyone.
It invalidated you in that moment.
Yeah. And it was actually about 8 years after it. So our family have gone through a big thing with a family member going through their own challenges, which I won't talk about because that's their journey, not mine. But for my mum to actually say, because when I was young, she's like, "Oh well, we're all blue sometimes." That's what she said to me. She laughed. She said, "Oh, don't be stupid. You know you want it." I went, "No, I know you want me, but that's not enough." And it was, and that's the other thing when I was growing up. That safety I felt like my mum and my aunt and my grandmother, they were awesome. Like my self-esteem is good because I knew they loved me. I knew they wanted me. I knew like they were, but my dad was not present. And that father, that absent of that, this, and everyone used to go, oh, dads and their daughters, dads and their little girls. And I'd be like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Sorry, I'm a swearer. I'm like, pfft. And then there's the jealousy of people who have that relationship with their dad. And because it's such a societal norm, me going, well, clearly I don't know, I don't think I ever thought there was something wrong with me. Like, I think my self-esteem was like, I blamed it fully on him. But there's that still thing of, well, I'm not wanted by my dad. I'm like, and therefore, if my father doesn't want me, that relationship that everyone in society is like, oh, dads and their daughters, oh, dads and their daughters, just so gorgeous. Oh, and I'm like, well, if my dad doesn't want me, well, why would any other man want me?
Hmm.
And also, if my
That's
dad's a dick, all men are likely to be completely adulterous bastards. So,
you tend to if I've had this conversation multiple times. I don't have a great relationship with my father at all. And a lot of times when I have conversations, particularly with women who don't have great relationships, we talk about how we tend to find our father in almost every man that we meet. And it's never really the positive things. It's always the worst parts of him, right? And then it shows up in our relationships. It shows up in the way that we're able to trust as well. And while
and
that
that's
doesn't,
safety, like
yeah, the
that.
safety.
Your dad, like in the energetic work I do, the root chakra is safety, security, stability, strength. The root
Mhm.
energy center, which is formed from conception to about the age of 2. And that is the masculine energy. In the traditional roles, it was the masculine that provides safety, security, stability, like that physical safety. And without that, there, you don't have the bottom foundation of your pyramid.
And while that may to some seem, well, like you said, a societal norm, right? There are less expectations for a man and his relationship with his children than there is for a woman. And
Well, especially
oftentimes
back then. Thankfully, that is something that I
that's
really
shifting.
think is society is changing. And when I look at the way my younger brother is with his 2 girls, just makes my heart blossom so much. So that
Absolutely.
is changing. But yeah, 70s, 80s, nah.
But we don't actually recognize oftentimes that those fundamental relationships create trauma for us.
Yeah.
And trauma that stays around for a very long time unless we address it. What I appreciate in your storytelling was you saying, I don't necessarily believe that, I don't have this big T trauma. And if years ago, I probably wouldn't even have said that I was traumatized. That's the reason why I lead with storytelling, right? Because you others, myself, we've all had experiences, and they don't have to be like headlining experiences, right? They don't have to be those ones that get people to clutch their pearls, but we still end up having to navigate the residual impact of trauma, which for most of us shows up very similarly. Like you mentioned, one of the trauma responses of, being an overachiever, always busy, right? And then oftentimes we do that to kind of silence what's going on the inside anyway. But then you
Mm-hmm.
also mentioned a sense of a chameleon as well. You were always on the outskirts of your friend groups, which to me said you showed up in a way that would be accepted in the groups that you attach to, but it would require you to shift how you show up in the spaces that you attach to, right? So if you're, I don't know, based on what you said, you might be in a carnival group or versus your heavy metal rock group, and you kind of have to show up a little differently in each. And that, again, oftentimes is a trauma response because we are removed from our authenticity because of
Mm.
that lack of safety, right?
Or you don't know what it is because,
Right. And that's you think you're moving with the punches, but we don't, or one of the things that I advocate for is being able to step into our authenticity as early
mm,
as possible. But that's not something that's taught, and it's not something that's socially accepted, really, right? You're
yeah,
expected to show up in a certain way. So once you got past 43 and you had your big healing as you spoke about, what did that actually look like? And how has that shifted your next 9 years?
yeah. Well, I mean, it really, I mean, one of the blessings of my mum is she's always been very open, even at a much younger age, that she had friends who were Buddhist. She was doing yoga in 1980 something when it was considered like the most hippie thing in the world that you could possibly do. Although she grew up Church of England, she was very spiritually open to everything. So she bought me my first deck of tarot cards, for example. She gave me the book Jonathan Livingston Seagull and said, "Oh, you should read this." When I was 17, I didn't know it was a self-awareness, self-help book. When the Celestine Prophecy came out in the mid 90s, I was 22 when I read the Celestine Prophecy and that's all about personality styles and self-awareness and deep healing journeys and acknowledging other people's traumas. Actually, it's the 4 types of how you become. The poor me, the something, the aloof, the aggressor, and it's going, well, actually, and people become this because of. So thankfully, and with the spiritual connection, crystal work, healing, etc., that has also been a joint undercurrent. So the healing didn't just suddenly start at 43. It's always that awareness and that connection has always been there. And it got deeper when I was 37. So 2008, when I did a vocal sound healing course. And that was a course of 12 weeks. And it went through my own deep healing. I was just like, oh my good God, the stuff I released through vocal sounding. And that was also sort of deep self-awareness and the sounding together. So that's when it really, I did this one sounding with someone, and the only way I could describe it was like a Native American mourning song, like grief. And it was just, and I was, and there was snot and there was tears. And I was like, what am I grieving? What is this? And my aunt, who was my everything, had died a few years before. I was like, no, this isn't Auntie Sally. I've processed this. What is this? And I'm sounding it. And it came to the end. I was like, oh my God, it's Dad. And that was my real start of my healing point. And it was me acknowledging this grief, deep, visceral, cellular grief for the relationship I had never had with my dad.
Mm.
And that was the start. And then we were doing some work on the heart chakra, which one of the key energies is compassion. And I came to a sudden realization. I was like, I have no idea what my dad went through growing up in Ireland during and after the war. I had no idea what my dad went through to make him the man he is. Like what was lacking for him that meant he couldn't help himself but have affair after affair after, like could not stay faithful. Like what would, and having that compassion, and also having the compassion for me blaming him and hating him so viscerally, especially in my teenage years and early 20s, before I chilled out a bit and just became indifferent. And me going, and you know what? I never told them. Like they didn't know the times I sat at the top of the stairs trying to suss out what kind of drunk he was when he came home. Would he be like, could I go down and distract by being funny? And so an argument wouldn't happen. Or was he whiskey drunk and therefore violence, smashing was going to happen? And I needed to stay upstairs so that my 3-year-old baby brother I could take into my bed. And then when he was back asleep and everything was quiet, I could put him back in his bed and hope that he'd just go back to sleep and not know anything about it. Like my mum and dad didn't know I did all that because I never told them. So that moment of coming to compassion was huge. And I say it took me 6 years to go through my dad healing journey so from 37 to 43. At 43, the tools I used, it was a couple of things. It was a relationship breakup, which, yeah, the guy, I'd had a moment when I was with him and I just went, you know what, I had a dad who never told me or showed me that he loved me. I don't need that from my boyfriend. So if you're not capable of this, then we can't be together. So there'd been the breakup, I think, about a year or so before. There was Brexit. I was still doing nothing with my career, and I was still, and so all of that had happened. And in that moment, I'd also done some training. So what triggered it was I'd done some really deep coaching training,
Mm.
deep self-awareness stuff that went into the places of identity. So that thing you were talking about our authentic self. And it was this identity piece, and your solar plexus just open wide, going, well, if I leave acting, then who am I without acting? Like, I've lost my whole identity. I am an actress. Like, it was my whole life, not just what I did. And that realization, that coming into allowing me to be more than that, and then having the conversation with my father and using all the tools and techniques that I use with my clients now about how to have challenging conversations. And I was like, right, he's still alive. I have the opportunity to ask him. So I went and had the conversation. And it was one thing. Well, there's two things. The one question, did you ever really want me in your life? And the second thing, which is the biggest thing, I couldn't have that conversation. I couldn't go and ask that question unless I was prepared to hear him say yes and believe him. There was no point having that conversation if he was going to say yes and I go, oh yeah, well, he's a liar, so he's just lying anyway. That was my big transformation. It was like, I have to be prepared. And I did. And I said, did you? And he went, of course I did. And turns out my dad loves me. Who knew? Um,
He
and
loved you in the way that he could
in
based
the
on what he went
only,
through. Yeah.
yeah,
And you know what? Whenever I hear people talk about that level of compassion that often comes as a result of healing, you spend a lot of years angry and then you heal or you're healing because healed is not a final
yeah,
destination, but as you're healing and you get to that place where now you're curious, right? Like what could have happened for that person to react to me like that? Like what? And it's you have the curiosity, but then you also have like this reconciliation. If my trauma, my experience created this in me, I can now understand how it could create something in someone else. And because I know how deeply rooted my own shit was, I have a little bit more grace for that person now.
yeah.
The other thing that you mentioned that I probably don't go through one episode without mentioning because it's part of my 3 steps to accident survival mode, and that's self-awareness. I
Mm.
always say self-awareness I liken to a lighthouse. We are in darkness oftentimes as we are
Shining
journeying.
light on everything else, but not ourselves.
Yeah. But this lighthouse comes through and it shines a light that allows us to see what's in front of us, what's around us, what's behind us. But it also gives us the opportunity to make a shift in case we're heading straight to the rocks, right? And we can change what we can see. But once we are aware of that, once we are able to see, wait a minute, I'm about to hit this cliff in 2.5 seconds unless I do something different, we then have control of what comes next because we can now action it. And I say then the second step is a reprogramming, changing our narrative, challenging our beliefs, challenging the way that we think, right? And getting clarity. Like I tell people, my biggest aha moment in my healing process was probably during my coaching training and understanding the connection between my feelings, emotions, thoughts, and actions. Like it was removed from me that all of that was combined, right? But getting to a place where I understanding how powerful my thoughts are and that I actually have choice over them It's life changing. And then there are
Hmm.
these reinvention, and you spoke to this a little bit after, you walked away from acting, having to redefine you because acting was your whole life. And I think those three things in that order is what actually helps us to get out of survival mode, right? Like that's the exit plan right there. And it takes time. It could take years. It took me decades to get out. But it's that commitment to having radical ownership of our lives and not just sitting on the sidelines and watching things happen and watching our lives just pass us by.
Yeah. And like I say, it took 6 years for my dad process. And then we just went through a whole year of hell family wise recently. And I was sort of back in survival mode, right? Trying to, it didn't work for 3 months. So how am I literally going to survive? And it brought up a whole load of stuff with me and my mum. But this time it took 6 months.
Mm.
And that's the magic of doing the work. That's the magic of the deep self-awareness, the changing your patterns, and the getting out of a situation. Like that's the that's how this works.
Yeah. And you bring up an interesting point there because I think some people think that once they're out of survival mode, they're done with it, the door is closed. The reality is,
Life
no,
keeps lifing.
life keeps life in, and we often cycle through survival mode multiple times in our lives, which is why the healing process is so important because we pick up tools that allow us to navigate those ebbs and flows in a quicker time. You condensed it by 5.5 years just because you did the work, right? But it
Yeah.
wasn't the absence of things not happening around you. It wasn't in the absence of life in. We have to take these tools and these lessons that we learn that often edify us and define us, right? We have to take them into each portion of our lives, each portion of our journey, in hopes that if we do end up in survival mode again, we're not stuck there for decades, right? It might be a couple of months because we're human. We have the opportunity to process our environments and our experiences.
And
And
when things come up again, it's so often like, oh my God, I didn't know I was holding that.
mhm,
Because because it is something different and it is in your cell memory. And that's where we really have to go, are you doing the work? Because when it comes up again, there's then the opportunity to go, like, and I tried like a couple of years ago, I spiraled back down and I was like, and I was so annoyed at myself because I couldn't go back to suicidal thoughts. And I was so angry. I was like, I just can't think about it anymore. And I was really pissed off because it would have been so much easier to
mhm,
fall back into that pattern um, of
woe is me.
woe is me, poor me. Let's get back into that pattern. And I just couldn't. The door was shut, and I'm like, oh, now there's only the
Can I just
whole.
have a moment, please?
Yeah, now there's only me having to do the work. That's not
Yeah.
fair.
So tell us a little bit more about the sound healing and the work that you do with clients.
Yeah, vocal sound healing. From when I experienced it and released my big, like, really recognize the power of recognizing what you're holding on to, because your voice is a reflection of every experience or emotion you've ever had, witnessed, or imagined. And your voice is a reflection of your thoughts and feelings about yourself, other people, and the situations you're in. Your voice will not lie. Everyone knows this. It's like you have a different voice when you're feeling comfortable and at ease with people than when you're feeling stressed. And so vocal sounding in the shortest possible way is allowing yourself to viscerally feel that and to give voice to the things that either you do know but you don't want to talk about, or even just using the sound, and as you sound it will bring up emotions. So as I guide people sort of in either in my workshops or my retreats or one-to-one work, like, we will be repeating a sound like ha for the heart chakra, ha ha ha, and I'll go a little bit deeper into your body, and someone will go, no, I don't want to sound there, and the body will go, no. That's sound healing in action. That's the recognition. As soon as you go into that space and your body goes, you're holding a trauma there. And then you have a choice. You can sound around it, you can gently sound above it, you can come back to humming and gently let the sound do the work on a physical, mental, energetic, and emotional level.
Hmm. That's beautiful. I've done sound healing, not vocal sound healing, but just the bills. And at first I was very skeptical. Like, what is this gonna do? And let me tell you, it reached me in my absolute core. And I walked out of there. Ooh, I know I have to dig a little deeper now. You know what I mean? Because
Well,
it was that awareness. It brought that awareness that this is touching something that I haven't explored fully.
because the vibrations of the sound literally travel through your cells and they change your cell vibration. So anything your cells are holding onto will be released. Which
Hmm.
is why I love vocal sound healing, because you'd be doing the sounding. So like you come on my retreat, you're lying there sounding. I'm just speaking over the top what you might be feeling in this space, but you're in control of how deep it goes.
Hmm.
So unlike when someone's playing, you're at the mercy of their playing. With vocal sounding, you're sounding. So if you're like, whoa, this is too much, you can just come back to a hum, or you can come back to breath. Or if you're like, oh my God, this is a lot, but I really want to let it go, you can be like, ha, or you can be like, oh my God, it's a bit much. So that's the beauty of it. It's the only sound healing that works from the inside out.
Mm. Okay. Well, Judith, I have definitely enjoyed this conversation. Tell us a bit more about how we can find you online.
You can find me my website, yourwholevoice.com, or Instagram and Facebook at Your Whole Voice. And the whole is obviously as a whole person, WHOLE, Your Whole Voice.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time on Survival Mode Disrupted. Before we wrap it all up, one key takeaway for the audience to action.
Oh, if you know, when you come to the recognition that you are in survival mode, take a moment and breathe, and then find the best next step for you. I would highly recommend whatever gives you deeper self awareness, because self awareness is the key. Recognize your patterns. And if you don't know whether you're in survival mode, recognize your patterns when things are stressful and just take note, because that's the first step to self-awareness, is recognizing your patterns.
Nice your patterns, audience. Judith, thank you so much for being a guest in Survivor Mood. Audience, thank you for catching yet another episode. And I just want to remind you, you were not built to break, but you damn sure were not built to just survive. Disrupt the cycle, reclaim your life, and thrive on your own terms. And I will see you next week. Once again, thank you for joining another episode of Survival Mood Disrupted, hosted by the Survival Mood Disruptor, Letitia. You didn't land here by accident. This conversation, it probably cracked something open on purpose. Because survival mode isn't just a phase, it's a pattern, an identity, a prison masked as strength. But here's the truth. You're not broken, you're just unfinished. So if something stirred in you today, don't ignore it, don't numb it, move with it. And I want to once again invite you to join Disrupting Survival Mode, the Facebook community where healing is loud and messy and real. I also want to invite you to buy my book, The Survival Mode Exit Plan, because your breakthrough deserves a blueprint. And if you felt seen today, be sure to share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe, and drop a review. That's how amplify the voices that need to be heard. And remember, this isn't about fixing yourself. This is about finding yourself again beneath the rubble. Until next time, choose ease, choose power, choose you. This is Survival Mode Disrupted. Let's keep shaking shit up.